This morning, we have new details about a high school student in Texas who police say was fatally stabbed at a track meet. Detectives say 17-year-old Carmelo Anthony has confessed to killing Austin Metcalf. Investigators say he told them he was trying to protect himself. The stabbing happened at a district championship near Dallas. The victim's brother said things escalated when Austin asked Anthony to move because he was sitting under the wrong tent. Anthony has now been charged with first-degree murder.
They all up. Every one of them. It was all stupidity and escalating when you could have de-escalated because 17-year-olds are stupid.
Yeah.
They're stupid. So we are the Armed Attorneys. Today we are talking about the hottest new self-defense case, maybe,
Asterisk.
to come out of the state of Texas. We're going to talk about the two 17-year-olds, one of which died at a Texas track meet recently. We're going to talk about what the good self-defense facts are, what the bad self-defense facts are, and even if you have bad self-defense facts, what it starts to mean just that you're saying the words and what ball gets rolling. But before we get started, show your support for the Second Amendment by hitting the like button.
And, you know, what started this conversation was there's an investigative journalist, Sarah Fields. She obtained a public records request of this incident out of Frisco. Obviously, a huge tragedy. 17-year-old lost their life. Another person, the suspect, charged with murder. Now, reading through this, you know, she posted the offense report, redacted. Obviously, there's some material that's redacted, but it really did provide a ton of insight to that. We'll link that down below if anybody wants to go check it out. But it started this complete firestorm. You know, poor Sarah just reporting the news. And so, you know, we're going to try to keep this as sterile as possible, just talking about self-defense under the facts as presented in the police report. I'll say it looks, you know, it does seem to be very, you know, I read police reports all the time. You read police reports all the time. You do see when police officers are totally just filling in gaps that they shouldn't be filling in or saying things they shouldn't be saying. This really is like a just the facts, ma'am, as far as I can tell. It's closer to that than like a super, you know, sensationalized report.
Right. So we have two 17-year-olds. They are at a track meet in Frisco, Texas. The visiting team has set up a pop-up tent on the field or just adjacent to the field. And one of the athletes comes to find a opposing high school, either athlete or student, I'm not certain at this point, in their tent. And as teenagers are wont to do, gets territorial and says, not your tent, not your team, you got to get out. And then tragedy ensues.
Yeah, so I mean, obviously there's a little bit of a confrontation here. The deceased, the complaining witness, victim, I mean, it appears, and I guess we go into good self-defense first, then we'll talk about the bad self-defense, and then, you know, do we think this is ultimately going to prevail as a self-defense claim? You know, I mean, a physical confrontation is started by the complainant, but, you know, what does it look like? It looks like push.
Yeah, right. So that's, I mean, let's talk about, so, you know, we know from the police report that the defendant has alleged self-defense.
Yep.
And so what are those good self-defense facts? Well, he says, I was sitting there minding my own business. These two guys, right, the complainant and his brother, they're bigger than me. They come into the tent. The one is aggressive. He's telling me to get out. He puts his hands on me first, right? He shoves me. And he says this, sua sponte to the police, I did it. I had to protect myself.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, still not the best self-defense facts I've ever heard, but you got your statement out there, right?
Yeah.
I had to protect myself.
I would be, I mean, he's going to get a self-defense instruction.
He's going to get an instruction. Yeah. I mean, he set that ball rolling. And, you know, he was smaller, he was outnumbered, and he did not start the physical nature of the confrontation. Good. However, I think highly outweighed by the bad. So what's the bad?
So a lot of things. Well, you know, and I think a backdrop to this we have to look at, because ultimately we know, you know, what level of force did the defendant use in this case? Well, it was a use of deadly force. And so Texas law, you know, there's really three key requirements that would justify a use of deadly force. It has to be reasonable, has to be immediately necessary, and it has to be in response to another's use or attempted use of unlawful deadly force. So, and when we say deadly force, we mean force that is intended or is likely to cause serious bodily injury or death. So protracted loss of a limb, permanent loss of an organ, or death. Obviously, we know what that is. And so his response, the defendant's response to this, I mean, he would need to articulate, I thought I was going to die.
Why did you think you were going to die right then?
Right.
Right? And that's just that from what we can tell, again, thus far, based on the police report and the descriptions, there's just nothing. There's nothing. Like, you don't get to respond to being shoved by stabbing someone. Generally, unless circumstances are really wild beyond what we're talking about here, you don't get to respond to someone punching you by stabbing them. Like, it is deadly force meets deadly force. There are like 30 student witnesses. You would assume adults around too. I mean, but the stabbing? Okay.
So defendant had a knife on school grounds. I've saw a lot of chatter about this. Would this be per se illegal? I haven't seen anything about the characteristics of the knife. But, we have a part of the education code. Obviously, you can discipline students, you can expel them, you can do all these things if they bring a weapon on the school grounds. But was the possession of the knife a criminal act? I don't know. I don't know. I have to look.
Yeah, definitely violates zero tolerance
Yes.
in Texas, but that is a school policy. I mean, was the blade over 5.5 inches? We don't have that information yet,
No.
and that would be school premises, and he wasn't in the school premises.
Is it pop-up tent premises?
Is a pop-up tent a premises?
I don't know the answer.
Probably not. However, I mean, I think you ask a jury that potentially. So yes, there are lots of questions. Ultimately, the knife doesn't, I mean, other than just giving the jury something to go, we don't like that he had a knife on him.
Right.
I don't think it's going to matter that much. I don't think it's going to be a crime such that he wasn't allowed to stand his ground.
Yeah,
Right?
so that's ultimately what this question revolves around. If he was, and there's 3 conditions where you have a jury gets to consider your failure to retreat, and that's if you're committing some other crime, maybe the unlawful possession of a location restricted knife. We don't know all the answers to that yet. If you provoke the interaction, saw some discussion about this online. Provocation means something really specific. It means it's not just starting the fight, it's tricking the person as a pretext to using force or deadly force. So I don't see any provocation facts. Or if you weren't in a place you were legally allowed to be, does that apply here in a visiting team's tent? I don't know. So you see, there's a lot of, this is not a simple self-defense case or stand your ground analysis. I mean, ultimately, a jury is probably, I don't know what they're going to get instructed on. I don't know what the evidence is going to show, but this, as far as self-defense facts go, I mean, I can tell you, juries are not going to like this guy having a knife.
No, they're not. They're also not going to like some of the statements that were made.
Yeah.
Including, it is alleged that he grabbed his backpack, unzipped it, and sort of reached inside and said, "Touch me and see what happens." Like, if you have time to do all those things,
That might be a legal provocation, actually.
maybe. If I were a prosecutor, I would argue it.
Yeah.
I don't know if I was a juror, if I would find it, but it's a decent argument.
Yep.
So, I mean, well, that's not like taunting someone to like attack you while you have a knife and you're handling a knife is like not really good self-defense under any circumstances. So, ideally you are trying to de-escalate and you are trying to avoid the circumstance. However, 17-year-olds are notoriously stupid. We've had many 17-year-old self-defense clients.
Yeah.
And everything from small fights to actually shooting people. I've had 2 17-year-olds shoot family members. And I can say that across the board, even the ones who did not get convicted of those self-defense shootings, they all f***ed up. Every one of them. It was all stupidity and escalating when you could have de-escalated because 17-year-olds are stupid.
Yeah.
They're stupid. So, the taunting was stupid. The having the knife was stupid. At best, stupid. At worst, like incredibly vicious criminality. But then finally, we've got this other sua sponte statement to the police, which doesn't seem that bad unless you practice in this area of law. And then you're like, oh, it's going to be a big deal.
Yeah, and that's him saying, again, I believe they're walking to the officer's patrol vehicle. He asked, could this be self-defense?
Could this be considered self-defense? You don't say that.
No, that's one of those recent fabrications. That's what prosecutors look at and say, hey, guess what? you came up with your self-defense story later.
Yeah.
This was a fabrication.
Yeah.
You weren't really afraid of what was going on.
If you have to ask if you were defending yourself, you weren't defending yourself, right? It's, I was gonna die. I had to defend myself.
Yeah.
This was self-defense. Like, if you're like, could this be considered self-defense? Oof. If I am a prosecutor, I am going to town.
Yeah.
Going to town on that statement.
Yeah, it's almost like a burden shifting back to the defendant.
No,
Instead of
sure
saying the
enough.
state has to disprove self-defense beyond a reasonable doubt, it's like the defense asking, could this
Yeah.
be self-defense?
Why didn't he think it was self-defense?
Right. So, I mean, this is not a good statement. All right. So, but let's talk about social media posts.
Oh, this is another instance of just people being, I mean, not just kids, lots of people do this. So there have already, because social media is the world we live in today, already been photos emerging of this 17-year-old suspect defendant posting lots of social media photos of him sort of threateningly waving around firearms. Will those be admissible? We don't know. And that is a huge problem, because that takes it from the world of, in the jury's mind, this is a kid who, yeah, he had this, weapon in his backpack, but it's a weekend and it's not necessarily illegal. And, that he was just protecting himself, to, oh, this is a kid who's like posting photos of himself with like cash and guns and waving them around. Like, no, 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 no. And I know people are like, how is that admissible? What's the answer, Richard?
Well, it just depends. I mean, you can
depends.
open up the door to all of this stuff.
Yeah.
The other one that's going around is he'd previously been disciplined for bringing a knife onto the school campus. Same thing, is that
admissible?
Yeah, is that admissible? And the answer is going to be depends. I mean, if they say, hey, look, he never brought a knife. If they say that, I mean, the defense says, oh, he's never done this before. Well, guess what? The prosecution gets to correct the misimpression left on the mind of the jury. Guess what? Maybe that comes in.
Yep. I mean,
Same thing with these photos. They say he never carries, or he's not a violent person. Guess what? Doors wide open.
Yeah.
Here's all this stuff that probably wouldn't be admissible otherwise.
correct. And it's up to the judge. It's up to the judge. I mean, if he opens the door to it, those photos might make the fact of his demeanor, his temper, which is always going to come up in a self-defense case. What is the reputation for peaceableness or violence? And then you open that door, and then you get to counter that. And so both sides end up talking about it. And once they start alleging that he has a reputation for peacefulness, the judge is just going to look at those photos and say, well, they're probative of that, but are they more prejudicial? And that's just one guy or gal sitting up there in a black robe. And I can tell you that most judges are really stupid.
Yeah.
And so you don't know what you're going to get.
But I think to kind of center the conversation just a little bit, looking at what factors do we look for in a good self-defense case, innocence, imminence, proportionality, reasonableness, and avoidance. I want to run through those real fast, because I think that's, and when you have these kind of hypothetical questions in your mind, you're reading something about the news, if you run through these, I mean, it really can tell you a lot about, hey, is this a justified use of force or deadly force claim or not? So with innocence, we're looking, did this person initiate the confrontation or escalate it? Well, probably did, so we don't have that. Imminence, did he have to act right then without delay, no time to summon for help? Probably not if he had time to open up a backpack.
Leave the tent. Someone's shoving you out of a tent.
Yeah,
Leave the tent.
we'll get there. Proportionality, was the threat, were these similar or close to each other? It doesn't appear to be that way. So it seems to be disproportional. Avoidance, let's do that one next. Was there a reasonable, safe alternative to using deadly force in this situation? For God's sakes, yes, obviously. So I don't think we have that one. And then reasonableness, what would an ordinary and prudent person do in the circumstances as, the defendant charged in these circumstances? And this is kind of an umbrella factor that goes towards all those other things. I don't know the response to getting yelled at and shoved is to, knife somebody. And so when we're looking at, all right, a good self-defense case has all 5 of those factors. Maybe arguable. I don't see really any of these. And I think it's kind of, the chances of a successful self-defense claim, I would say, is probably less than 5%.
Pretty damn low. And the bond's been set at $1 million, which although Collin County is notoriously unreasonable, that tells me something too. Because at 17, $1 million bond is, I mean, like our murder clients get set at like $50,000 bond. It'll
Right.
go up probably after, this year. But I mean, $1 million bond tells me something.
Yeah,
We'll
but
see.
this is again very early in the tragedy. We're just operating off of a report, some supplements. We'll link that if y'all want to read that in full detail. These witness interviews, kind of the tone of these things, statements by the defendant. I mean, these old things will change. I mean, and I'm not going to say that this prediction is locked in stone, but I don't see it changing very much.
No.
And, it's a tragedy. We don't like to talk about this kind of stuff, but we received so many questions just because the word self-defense got thrown out there. Does that mean someone's going to prevail on it?
No.
I don't think so, but we hope you enjoyed this discussion. If you did, consider subscribing, hitting that like button, and help us fight the anti-2A algorithm by sharing this video.
And as always, question and comment for us below. Until next time, we're the Armed Attorneys.